Hi, Justin. I'm looking at the joiners right now. Thanks for joining. We're going to let a few more people join up. So we'll just give it a couple minutes here. Hi, Ryan. I'm just watching the attendees list as people join in. So we're just giving it a few more minutes. Hi, Sean. I'm Scott. We're watching the attendees list right now and just letting a few more people join in. Give it a couple minutes past the hour. Hi, Aim. All right. Give our friends one more minute or so, see if anybody else is running from a little break after the top of the hour to try to get here, and then we'll dive in. Okay, just letting everybody know also that my usual partner in these, Mia, is not here today. So she always sets up all kinds of great polls and chats and handouts and makes these interactive, but she's off at an all-day meeting. And so I will be running this a little bit more like the way that I've taught my online classes. I've got some material set up to talk through, but I will be watching the chat and I'll try to pause as frequently as I can. And I would love to field questions or thoughts, etc. And if it's easier for you to ask. I can let anybody on stage during this presentation. Orion, you fell victim to this last time, I think, and we can actually chat through things. So I'd love to, although at the moment I'm in presenter mode and you're in chat mode, I would love to keep this. Yeah, you did. I would, but it was good. It was a good discussion. So hopefully we'll do that again. I'd love to keep this discussional, conversational, and so you can jump in as you see fit, please. All right, let me see if I can get this clicking. There we go. Okay, so can't recall if all of you, I know definitely a few of you were in the previous session where we went through the foundations of optimization strategy. So today is also a strategic discussion, and it's really about the approach and the point of view, and it's going to elaborate a little bit more on some of the models and approaches that we looked at in the last session. And this is all leading up to the guided optimization roadmap. And the whole principle behind this is that, before we set anything in motion and really start to put resources into designs, deployment of designs, and measuring of designs, the strategy, both the strategy itself, thinking about the business, and then what we're going to talk about today, the decision-making approaches. Really, it's a garbage in, garbage out problem, right? So it's easy enough to set up a tool and start doing testing. It's really just a technical problem. What's much harder is having that approach to developing hypotheses and developing a program that that gives you the expectation that you're going to achieve results. So that's what we're going to talk about today is how do we get out of our own way in looking for those results. I shared this last time, and so I'll just be very brief about it. I've been working in agency and tech platform analytics and optimization work for a couple of decades now. I've had the opportunity over that time to get into lots of organizations and work with them, and lots of different types of organizations as well, from consumer packaged goods to financials to high tech and et cetera. So what I'll be sharing in terms of how organizations work has been hard-earned across the span of time and working with these types of clients. If I seem a little bit lectury, that's because that's in my background. I taught at Northwestern University's IMC program from 2012 to 2018, teaching statistics, so the very dry functional stuff, as well as developing and teaching the program's first course on digital analytics. And if I seem wordy, that's because I'm actually a writer. I wrote a book on this topic, which was published in 2016 and then refreshed again in 2020. And so luckily I have all of this to draw from and share with you today. Okay, so a quick recap on where we left off at the end of last year. So what we really focused on in the last session was the consumer journey and this notion of thinking about the consumer and being in the consumer's head as critical to optimization, right? Because what are we trying to do with conversion rate optimization, with conversion in general? We're trying to move these consumers from not knowing anything about us, perhaps, moving us into consideration, exploring, evaluating, and then eventually buying from us, eventually converting. And the consumer journey is useful, and we talked about it because it really puts us in the mindset of that consumer. They have to find us, and we need to know what can we do to have them find us. They need to explore, and we need to know, okay, how do we help them explore? What are we, are we getting in our own way? And is there a reason they're not exploring with it, right? Are we giving them good tools to evaluate us in the context of the other conversion decisions they can make? And then finally, the purchase. Are we making it easy for them to follow through? And if they make a decision to convert with us, are we making it easier for them to follow through? And we talked about the fact that we don't want to confuse conversion with only sales, right? There is a sales conversion, and we're all in business for that sales conversion. It's not always directly in our reach. Some of us have, offline sales teams or other groups in between. Some of us are only in the acquisition team. Some of us are at a distance from where that close happens. So the point of this slide was that, yes, there's sales conversion, and sales conversion is of course critical to the business because the business is in business to make sales and convert into revenue. But when we talk about conversion and conversion rate optimization, there are what we often call micro conversions. And so we can be thinking, when we talk about conversion rate optimization, we can be thinking about any of these. It's not only that final point that closes the deal, but it can be moving through all of these points in the consumer journey, right? What moves them through exploration? What makes them willing to reach out to us? What moves them from acquisition deeper? And then what makes them follow through? Those are all points of conversion. And so conversion rate optimization is not a thing that is only focused on one type of conversion. It is that practice of learning, understanding, and putting into practice things that are going to increase movement through this consumer journey. So we can think about, how do we acquire these customers? So that's movement from acquisition into exploration. That's a conversion, moving them from acquisition to exploration, moving them from exploration into evaluation. That's a conversion. So that really we're thinking about these drivers and barriers to movement through this journey, right? And if you keep that in mind, that this is actually a flow from acquisition through exploration, through evaluation to purchase, then we can think about how helpful would it be to have motivators or things that push you along through this flow, and how unhelpful would it be to have barriers or things that block you during this flow. We talked in the first session about mapping objectives, right? And so setting out, okay, what is it we're trying to accomplish as a business? We want to get more people to our site. We want to get more people to stay on the site. And again, some of us may have responsibility for only certain of these and not others, but the business as a whole is going to want all of these objectives, right? And this is just an example of what you might write down for your business. We want to have the site make people more interested in buying. We want to help interested people start their transaction. And then, of course, we want to make sure that interested people complete their transaction. And then it's just helpful, maybe visually, the way that I think a lot, map these out by, okay, where do these objectives fall in the consumer journey? These are acquisition objectives. This is an interest objective. I'm working in interest, if I want to make this happen. I'm working on intent if I want to make this happen. And then this finally is the ultimate business objective. And then we talked about, as we list more of these objectives, and so this one has just added a few, what metrics and KPIs would we add to this? And this is just really setting out your measurement plan. Okay, I want to get more people to the site. I'm going to measure that by traffic referrals. I want to get more people to stay on the site. Okay, I'm going to look at bounce rate. If I can optimize bounce rate, then I'll have more people staying on the site and moving through. More people interested in buying, scrolls, exit rate, page time, right? So these are all, this is the next column in this process. What are my objectives? What am I going to measure for these objectives? And then the question of, is this a performance goal? Right? Is it a goal to have people more interested in buying? Well, that's a micro conversion, but our goal is really around content downloads in this case, session or page time. So there are these certain KPIs or metrics that we say these are going to be goals. Generating leads, sales volume, sales dollars. These are all going to be goals, and we're going to optimize against these as goals, right? So this was just a process we went through of systematically thinking through this work and articulating it. Okay. Any questions on that recap? Anything that I went through too fast, or that was kind of an open question before that we want to revisit? I'm looking in the chat. Nope. I don't see anything, then we will carry on. Okay. So now let's talk about the barriers to optimization. And this whole introduction that we've just gone through was focused on the consumer journey, right? The consumer journey is a model. And the thing that I want to start with here is that models and maps do not create reality, right? All that a model or a map is a representation of a dimension of reality, right? So the consumer journey is something that consumers are doing, right? It's just actually the actions that they're taking, the way that they're thinking. It belongs to them and it exists out there. And all consumers are on a consumer journey from the time that they think about making a purchase and have a trigger or a reason through to their conversion, right? We have an abstract representation of it in a map, right? Or a model where we say, we know this is happening and we can think about ways in which this is happening. So these two things are models of reality, the consumer journey, which we spent some time on, and then the conversion funnel, right? And what's important to understand is that these each model a different dimension of reality. So they're strategically useful in different ways. The fact is that the conversion funnel does oftentimes have similar sections or compartments or phases or stages to what the consumer journey has. And in fact, that's shown a little bit here, right? There's an acquisition at the top of the funnel narrows, fewer people are exploring, the funnel narrows more, fewer people are in evaluation, and then finally the funnel reaches the bottom, there are even fewer people in experience. And all that is recognizing is that in the consumer journey, fewer and fewer people will move through to the end, right? There will be some attrition through the journey. And so that's what this model is useful at recognizing. It recognizes that not everyone who starts will be there at the end. And it allows us to do really useful things like setting and measuring quantified goals around conversion rates from one stage to the other, right? Thinking of this in terms of a funnel where some people go through and some people fall out. It's a little bit more like a colander, I guess. Some people fall through, some people fall out. This helps us to say, okay, well, what is that rate of falling out? What is that rate of moving through? We can set goals against that, right? So I mentioned this because there was a trend for everyone used the funnel. Everyone used the funnel to think about conversion. And then this notion of the consumer journey came along, and everyone started talking about the consumer journey, or the customer journey. But in a lot of cases, it was just a different name for the funnel. So that's a problem in two ways. One, the consumer journey has value in its own right that we should let it possess. And second, we lose the dimensionality of having both the notion of the funnel, which teaches us one thing, and the notion of the consumer journey, which teaches us and focuses on another thing. So let's think about the focus from the funnel. Let's go ahead and say the funnel is okay to have. It's okay to talk about a funnel. It's not uncool. It's not, retro or backwards. You're supposed to say consumer journey because it has consumer or customer in it. The funnel has a purpose, thinking about movement, thinking about attrition, thinking about conversion rates, and allowing us to forecast What expectation can we have about moving people through, right? So it's fine to talk about the funnel. It's good. The consumer journey belongs to the consumer. The funnel belongs to you. The consumer journey belongs to the consumer, right? Each consumer is on their own journey of exploration. And it's important to recognize, and we talk about this in CRO when we look at competitive drivers for conversion rate optimization, right? If someone is looking at you as an option, then they are probably looking at competitors or substitutes. One of the substitute being nothing, right? Like, okay, I don't need this. Other substitutes being something close enough or something a little bit different, a different way to spend the money, and then potentially competitors in your field as well. And then there's you, right? So in the consumer journey helps us move out of the funnel, which is just about those people we've seen at the top and can we get them down to the bottom. It's very inside out focused. The consumer journey completely flips that. It's outside in. Hey, there's this individual, this series of individuals. They're my prospective conversions, prospective sales conversions. They had a trigger. They're in a consideration stage. They're in an exploration stage, and I'm one of their options. Keeps us humble, right? Keeps us humble. Doesn't have us forget that. Ooh, I've got a prospect. I've got them into my flow. Now they're all mine to convert, right? That's true. I mean, in a way, they're yours to lose, but recognizing that you're still competing for them as they're on their journey, that's going to help you really bring that focus to, okay, how do I create these motivations? How do I avoid barriers? That's going to move them through with me and get me past these competitors that they're also looking at. Now, here's the problem with funnels, right? Is that funnels are inside out. So we set them up however we like, right? So in this case, we've got 3 companies, you, competitor X, and competitor Y. We've got this one consumer who's exploring some initial options in this category. Their eyes are at this level. They're looking across our companies. But as setting metrics around the KPIs around the funnel, this is where it gets funky, right? Because you might say, oh, well, given how they've engaged with us, they're in the early lead stage. They're still at the top. They have these other things to do to move through, right? But competitor X might have set up their creation of conversions differently to say, oh, no, I mean, this consumer actually had a video view, and that actually moved them into the second stage of being a prospect, right? They're at the same point in their buying decision for all of you. They're at the same point in their buying decision for all of you. And our notion of where they are by setting up funnels is entirely an inside out, imposition on them, right? Competitor Y has, a very narrow top of the funnel, doesn't take a lot to get out of the top of the funnel, has a pretty narrow second area of the funnel evaluation. Now, oh, this consumer is evaluating because they looked at a learn more click, right? So we've got three competitors, each saying that the consumer is at different depths of their funnel, while the consumer on their journey is in the exact same point of consideration with all of these. And then finally, the customer is also saying, well, I could still do something else besides choosing any of these, right? So this is the challenge of setting up KPIs around, oh, let's make sure that we achieve this much at this level of the funnel, as if the funnel is an end in itself. Because we might wind up like competitor Y and rig our funnel so that, oh yeah, look, everybody's getting to the third level of depth in our funnel. We're doing our job in acquisition, and we've just done that by setting much easier hurdles to move through, right? So the funnel is useful in the sense of it lets us plan, but we need to work from the bottom up, right? Of the people who ultimately converted, what were some behaviors that they did that seemed to us like exploration behaviors? What were some behaviors that they did that seemed like evaluation behaviors? And what were behaviors that got them from initial acquisition to, so the funnel, the funnel lever or the funnel hurdles, right, that move us from stage to stage, those should be data driven too, right? Like there should be a thought that says, okay, well, what does it really mean to be deeper in the funnel? These are behaviors that are correlated with ultimately buying, right? And the strength of correlation allows us to set those funnel hurdles, right? Movement from one stage to the other. Otherwise, we run the risk of just setting up stages that make it look like we're moving people through a funnel. But again, we look a little bit like competitor Y, where we've made the hurdles incredibly easy to move from stage 1 to stage 3. And then we report on metrics that say, look how many we're moving through stage 1 and stage 2. But really, that consumer is no further along with us than they are with any of our competitors. And in fact, we're doing ourselves a disservice by losing sight of really how far along are they in the consideration process. Okay, does that make sense as a challenge? Questions or thoughts on that? This is the first fundamental sort of shakedown of how we often think about setting up our conversion strategies or our internal designs around measurement. Questions, thoughts, no comments? Okay, I will carry on. So because these are both useful, the consumer journey and the funnel, one is, inside out, telling us, hey, when we get conversions, here's things that are correlated with right before that. Here's the things that are correlated with, before those, and then that gives us our funnel. And then consumer journey, hey, the consumer's out there going, what are we doing to make sure that they get what they need in terms of exploration? What are we doing to make sure they get what they need in terms of evaluation? And obviously those two go together, right? The better we are at delivering them what they need to explore us among their options, the more likely they are to move through the funnel toward evaluation. The better we are at giving them tools to evaluate us, the more likely they are to move into the purchase funnel. And the better we are at taking away barriers and driving motivations in the purchase funnel, the more likely they are to convert. So the two go together. And the consumer journey is considering what will make consumers choose us in the context of all their options. And the conversion funnel is how we engage consumers when they enact with us on their journey, right? The only real problem for an organization is when you're not considering both. So if you were in the last session, you'll remember this diagram from the book, and you'll remember the green line here, right? And the green line is up in the upper left green circle, measurement, right? Everybody's measuring in some way. You have GA or some other tool, and you're getting metrics. That becomes data, and then ideally that data informs strategy and planning, right? And strategy and planning, business goals are being set there. Then those business goals, they turn into UX design, and maybe, I just want to mention here, there's another thing that gets called consumer journey that shouldn't be, and that is setting up a workflow. And setting up a workflow with a CRM tool or a workflow tool, a marketing automation tool, is advertised as establishing the consumer journey. But really what you're doing is automating what you're showing within your funnel. It's still your funnel. It's still basically picking up where you have the customer, and it is an automation of content within your funnel. It got called consumer journey because that was a cool way to market the software. But if you're doing workflows and saying, yes, we consider the consumer journey without considering the consumer journey, which is these pink areas above, you're actually just implementing workflows and going with what the software vendor told you it was, which is a consumer journey map, right? The real consumer journey is up there in those pink circles. That, in this diagram, sadly, are cut out of the process, right? And those are behavior and context collection and analysis, right? So performance metrics are KPIs, right? How many did we get to achieve this? How many did we get to achieve that? Let's look at traffic from paid media spend by vendor, that's a metric, or by provider, by channel, that's a metric, right? Let's look at bounce rate. Let's look at clicks, content downloads. Let's look at where to buy clicks. Let's look at product page views. Those are all counts and amounts. And in this diagram, those counts and amounts, rear view mirror of what happened before, are driving strategy and planning. And typically that's because we say, oh, we should have more of this thing that we're counting or that thing that we're counting. But again, your business strategy is about what's going to sell more. There's oftentimes beliefs, and if they're correlated, that's great. Then you're ahead of the game, right? That say, oh, well, more of this should equal more of that. But to really deliver on consumer journey, we need to look at the consumer's behaviors. We need to look at their contexts, right? We need to collect that data. And then we need to conduct research and forecasting as well, right? And so these important stages are often skipped because we have measurement of prior performance. That becomes our data. We look at numbers that seem lower than they should and say we want to make those numbers higher. We come up with some test designs maybe that we think will make those numbers higher, get more clicks, get more views, get less bounce, etc. And then we're off from that strategy and planning circle, we're off to the left, and we've got this sort of half loop, right? We don't have enough of this number. Let's get more of that number. Here's some things we could try. And the problem is, how do we know what we're going to try if we haven't done the research, right? So this comes back to this question of when we only have that half circle, we're dealing with barrier number one. And this is where we get into the barriers as promised to good conversion rate optimization. And barrier one is we have an inside out versus an outside in strategy, right? Those two pink circles up in the top, those are the only things in this process that are about the consumer. The thing that we're calling measurement, the thing that we're calling data is about our performance. The strategy and planning without insight into the consumer is about our numbers and making them bigger. And then we try things to make those numbers bigger. So for example, we say, to improve our KPIs, we want more visitors to download white papers and then give us their email to sign up for a webinar. That's what we want, right? We want more downloads, we want more signups. Right. So that's a way in which, in this half circle, we say, okay, there we set some KPIs, and that's what we're going to try to test against. But without this knowledge of the upper right portion of this cycle, is it related to what consumers need as they explore and evaluate? And this is where we need to say we need to track behavior as well to know where and how we're recognizing consumers' interests or where we're not recognizing and serving consumers' interests. Okay, barrier number two, now the situation gets even worse, right? Now we've got a couple of blind spots, and we're really just in the cycle of strategy and planning. Then that second green circle is design and deployment, right? And then delivery, right? So we're looking at, we're coming up with some ideas about what we want to do. We're creating designs for them, and we're putting them out there, right? Now, this one, when you look at it this way, you're like, oh my God, how could that happen, right? But this happens a lot. Where the strategy and planning is not data driven, it happens a lot because there are people who have management roles and there are people who have high levels of responsibility, and they see themselves and act as decision makers, and so they come up with strategies and plans. And so this is the kind the kind of thing where you'd see this is, hey, we really have this thing we want to say. We really want to be known for this. We really want to position ourselves this way. We really want to be perceived in this way. So we made these landing pages, and they have this content that says what we want people to think about us and know what we want people to know about it. And we put all this budget into paid media to send people those landing pages. So now that we put all this into this, we built the landing pages, we spent the money, it's a foregone conclusion that this is where we need to be optimizing, right? And it can blind your organization to, oh, but look, you're also getting organic and direct traffic. And then we're seeing in that direct traffic that there are searches, but the searches aren't getting the right results and they're leading to exit. Why aren't you working on where people actually are as opposed to focusing everything on where you've decided you want people to be, right? So this is very inside out experience design. Okay, what causes these things to happen? So there's really two fundamental causes. There's confusion or competition in the organization over how we set objectives, right? And that's very typically when these objectives are not data driven. Or there's a lack of, there's a lack of knowledge into how to create the desired changes in consumer behavior. So when it comes down to competition or confusion in the organization over how we set objectives, this isn't just within the digital team or the marketing team, right? This is maybe in the instruction that the marketing team gets, the instruction that the digital team gets, right? And it's a question of how to prioritize knowledge or resources toward objectives. And this comes from organizational decision biases. So there are these three drivers, and I wrote a blog post on this the other week, so it might help. If you're interested to check that out, there's authority bias to begin with. And this is where the priorities are set by hippos. The highest paid person, the most senior person, the person with the coolest, biggest title, the person with the most org chart accountability for something, feels that gives them special insight. Any of those, right? Their seniority, their position. Okay. So sometimes there's real expertise. It's true. But sometimes there's mistaken expertise, right? In either case, it's best to back it up with data, right? So, if we're seeing like, oh, this is what I think we should be doing, and I'm a person whose opinion is important in this organization, and that's what's setting us off on our path, then we're really going to struggle to get to good CRO until that's overcome. Then there's this next one, which kind of factors these two together, confirmation bias. This is true for all of us in a lot of cases. We tend to see and absorb information and data and details that reestablishes or deepens our pre-established ideas or beliefs, right? So we emphasize data that confirms what we are, the beliefs we already held, and reaffirms that yes, we were right in thinking that. And we discount good information, good data that challenges our pre-held. And this is a problem writ large across human decision making. And these are all, by the way, decision making heuristics that are in the Thinking Fast and Slow book by Kahneman that he won a Nobel Prize for. So this notion of decision making heuristics is a well researched field, and it's worth reading more about. But if you put together confirmation bias and authority bias, the people that have authority in an organization have some things that they have long thought are important. They argued for them. They made a case for them. They got some funding for them. Now they're kind of tied to them. They're going to look for data that backs up that that was the right decision and that that was the right move, and they're going to throw their authority around a little bit to make that happen, right? So these are hard things. These come up a lot in organizations, and they're really hard things. And then there's a third, which is data dependency and deficient data. And Orion, I see you saying lack of a customer journey map. So I think this one goes along there, right? The data is the only way to solve the two above, right? Bringing more data, better data, more reliable data, and having, getting people to sit down and look at it. The way you present it is important. The data that you have is important. It's the only way to overcome these biases, right? Like, yes, I know that you think that's important. I know that that's, where we staked our claim on working before, but here's some, unassailable data, research, et cetera, forecasting that shows you that this is also a good approach, right? We should try this. And so data dependency, organizations that say that they're data driven, but only collect the data that supports confirmation biases, or only collect the data that that we're already interested in sort of seeing things proven, that becomes a problem. When an organization says it's data driven, but it is not data agnostic, and it doesn't collect all of the data, including what would be necessary for the customer journey map, then yeah, you're gonna struggle. So looking, if we were to try to solve these, you'd work backwards. You'd begin with, okay, what kind of data do I need to collect to have a broader view, a more whole view of the consumer journey, the customer journey, right? Then how do I need to present this so that it can be digested in my organization that has these confirmation biases, right? I see them, I recognize them. These are things that people want to be true. And how do I get the data that's going to help us see more than that? And how do I present it? And then finally, there's the challenge of how do I do this when there are important people that have a lot riding on these other ways of seeing things? How do I bring forward this data, address these confirmation biases? And this is where you can read books on change management, you can read books on managing up. The place where we're going to land with this today is these are the things it's necessary to admit exist in order to begin to move toward great CRO, right? Dealing with their existence, the recipe for that is going to be as unique as every organization and its inhabitants. But again, there are really good tools on change management that I'd be happy to talk about. If anybody's recognizing these in some small or large form as creating barriers to driving what could really be driving conversions, right? Reducing barriers to conversion and increasing motivations. Okay. Any questions up to here? Thoughts? All right. So if the conclusion there is that there are things that get in the way of an organization wanting or investing in or spending the time in. And it doesn't have to be, it could be a time investment, right? It could be just a different approach to analytics. You might already have the data. There's lots of behavioral data, event-based data. It's really just how you look into it, right? But effective strategy and optimization won't just come from knowing what is or isn't working, right? That performance measurement, right? Particularly if that performance measurement is oriented at those pre-established goals and are looking at only the areas that are filtered through a confirmation bias and are supporting only those initiatives that are being put forward due to an authority. So that effective strategy isn't going to come just from knowing the performance, right? We need to know are there groups or segments that can be defined around who is or isn't contributing to results, right? Like rather than just looking at the results as a whole, are we segmenting effectively so that we can design interventions, CRO interventions for different types of people? So how do we understand types of people? Who is converting, who isn't converting, and how there are types within research and forecasting? What behaviors and context from each group precede or impede a conversion? So what are the things that we see? It could be correlation, it could be actual sort of machine learning models, or it could just be simple regression, or it could just be graphs, right? But what do we see as conversions go up? What do we see go up before that, right? As conversions go down, what do we see go up? Okay, that's a barrier, right? If seeing this usually leads to not converting, that's a barrier, right? If seeing this go up leads to conversions, that's a motivation, right? And so learning the barriers and motivations, learning what is and isn't preceding things. And then also we might ask ourselves in that case, what did we think we designed into this process that would lead into conversion that we're not seeing as a behavior? So we kind of knew that this is what people want. We just didn't deliver it in the way that they wanted, right? So we wanted people to be doing more of this. They're not, but we still believe that if they were, that would lead to conversion. This is where our hypotheses, data-driven hypotheses, modeled hypotheses, which with the potential to forecast results from the tests, that comes out of this research and forecasting stage, right? And that leads to this last bullet. What are the largest improvements we can predict if we address these impediments, right? So that's telling us where would we start, right? Okay, well, if we could, if we see this always happening when people don't convert, if we can get rid of that, or we can move people past that, or we can present a different way of that, then great. We'll be able to forecast. Okay, this many people were exiting when we saw this co-behavior, right? When we saw this correlated behavior. If we take away the thing that's driving that behavior, or we improve it, we make it a driver instead of a barrier, make it a motivator instead of a barrier, and 10% more of the people who have been ditching us at that stage don't, and getting 10% more to convert is worth this much, then here's the ROI or the payoff on that effort, right? That's the ability to forecast from this research into who is and isn't converting, what behaviors or contexts to that conversion precede or impede that conversion, and then what are the largest improvements that we can predict. That's where we should start our conversion. And if you have those three answers, then you've got the tools that you need to work backwards against this confirmation bias and this authority bias, right? If you've got these answers about, look, we see things that are happening and then people leave. And there's a strong correlation between people getting to this point in our experience and then going no further. There's a barrier at that point, right? That is good, hard data that may help us to address a confirmation bias, right? It's not what we wanted to see, and the thing that we thought would work is not working, but we have data that shows that, and we have some ideas about how we proceed. And then that lets the people, the highest paid people, who have a stake in this, it gives them a little bit of an out. Well, the data is pointing us this way. So if you don't really know what's in these pink circles, right? If you don't understand behavior and the context around behaviors, and you don't have that research that's showing you, some sort of correlation between those behaviors and outcomes, either positive or negative correlation, and then you're not forecasting, hey, here's something I can probably fix, and if I fix it for 10% of the people that it hasn't been working for, here's what I get from it, right? If you're not doing those, then your input to strategy is very limited, right? It's just a rear view, right? And even with a performance dashboard that are showing you all those counts and amounts and metrics, you're still guessing at how to fix performance. Okay? Any questions on that in principle? Many of you have seen the next pieces before. These are just examples of what we recommend, and they come from the software. I won't belabor that point too much, but I'll just say that if you can produce this in any way, this is what we're talking about here, right? Can groups or segments be defined around who is or isn't contributing to results? Well, here we have a variety of tests that we've run, and we have some very straightforward segments. Overall visitors driven by paid. So this is just simple segmentation by referring source. And even in that, we can see that, okay, for example, and we talked about this example before, for example, this test demo video there was no difference between the control and the experiment. But when we look at paid traffic, the experiment had drove a substantial improvement, right? So it's washed out when we look at everybody. But actually, if we could personalize our experience to some extent for paid traffic only to get into this demo video, we see this significant increase in conversion. Social proof, significant increase in conversion, right? And then likewise, here we have a lift, we know where it happens, right? Here where we have what looks like a slight improvement in the experiment, 1.5% conversion rate versus 1.4% conversion rate, we see that, yes, but really we don't want to show this to new visitors or organic, right? So segmentation and where that points us for testing. This is another one about where we point for testing, correlation, right? What are the events, the viewing staff, right? Who are our staff? Sharing on social media, signing up for the newsletter, right? Here's the strength of the correlation to conversions, to sales conversions. And then likewise, here are some conversions that have very weak correlations, right? So how do we increase the strength of these correlations, and how do we try to drive more people into these behaviors that do have these correlations to outcomes? What's happening in the funnel? This is again similar, looking deeper down in the flow and saying, where are we, doing well versus benchmark? Where aren't we? But this is the kind of behavioral context, not just counts and amounts, but context, right? Comparison that lets us know where to point. Pages that are converting, and then finally this question of, well, what do we focus on first, right? Where do we go for our conversions, right? So these are the insights that point us at, here's how much additional revenue is out there. There's an e-commerce example here. There's a lead gen example here. Here's the kind of revenue that we forecast is out there. If you can get rid of these barriers or increase these motivations. And so if you can get more people on this page to move through these goals or events, here's the lift that we see available from that, right? If you roll out this experiment, here's the lift available from that. If there's a high traffic pages, if you improve the conversion from those high traffic pages, here's what we expect that you can see as a return from that, right? So let me go back up to get out of these examples, because that was, and come back to this, right? This is, the topic of today is removing barriers. You're removing those barriers so that you can conduct these top two pieces of the circle, which in the course of everyday business, a manager who's not really thinking about CRO might say, nah, those are overkill, right? Like we can go ahead and take our performance metrics, find out what pages aren't working, and just design some interventions to those pages, right? That was this view, right? Oh, well, we don't need that data to design tests and put them out there and try to lift some KPIs. We have measurement of the KPIs. We know the pages where things aren't working. We can design things, we can roll them out, right? So in some cases, it'll seem like overkill, right? In some cases, there won't even be the data. It'll just be, no. We decided at the beginning of the year that we were making this investment in these landing pages and pages. So that's where we're optimizing. So, the way to overcome these problems, authority bias, confirmation bias, data dependency, is from starting from the bottom and working back up. If you don't have enough data and you don't have this data in the upper circles, that's the place to start. Because once you get that data, okay, hi Orion, I can tell when I've started overhashing a point, because that's when the questions begin, which I love. It may be tactically why I do that, so that people will shut me up with questions. So is there a traffic size or business size where this level of detail is particularly recommended? I mean, no, I'm going to say that what traffic size or business size will determine is what it looks like, how much of it you do, how you're able to do it. But if I were the smallest startup in the world, I would still put some of my CRO planning. I would get, there are X or UI panels in a box where you can, for a couple $100, show some people an experience and have them give you feedback, right? Like it's like small scale user feedback, usability testing kind of stuff. It's only a couple $100, right? So, really like any business, I would say these things in the pink boxes, understanding your customers or your prospective customers' interests better than your competitors is the whole thing. Understanding your prospective customers' interests and needs better than your competitors will ultimately win you more business than your competitors. You know, if you don't have the same, you don't have the same brute force, you don't have the same budget, you can't spam as many people with acquisition mails, you can't get as many people into the top of the funnel, then it's all the more important to know them, know who you do get well enough that once they're in the funnel, you're really serving their needs through that flow, right? You can move them quickly and smoothly without barriers, with lots of motivation from acquisition into exploration. You can give them lots of reason and exploration to consider you and move them into evaluation. And you've done all your research about what their concerns are in your category, in your industry, so that when they get into evaluation and comparing you to another option, you're right there understanding them, right? So this level of detail, I would say, is more important than the things that people build dashboards for in the beginning. Because building dashboards and having, performance of this page and that page and et cetera, there's no explanatory power in that at all. You have a dashboard that says a page isn't doing well. Well, without understanding of the consumer, you don't know why. You have a dashboard that says that this page is going gangbusters, but you didn't really have insights into the consumer that planned for it. You don't know what of that page is causing it. Does that make sense, Orion? So I would say that, let's say depth of detail into understanding your customer and thinking about their journey. Depth of detail. Anybody can do. And you can do it with 6 interviews. You can do it with a little bit of survey, right? But you're just thinking more about, all the time, am I creating barriers? Am I serving the motivations, right? Versus you could have a bigger competitor that has the CRM system, they've got mail lists, they're spamming people, they've got people hitting the top of their funnel, they got workflow set up. So if you come from this, you come from this email, then you get shown this landing page, right? Like they got this whole elaborate system. Yeah, but if they haven't thought about what to do with you and how to serve you well. So I would say it's the depth of detail into understanding the consumer. And then that research and forecasting. Well, if I can only do one thing to make this experience better for the consumer, what have I heard is the thing that they most need? And of those, let's say 2 or 3, which of them can I most differentiate around in this experience? Which of these will set me most apart from what else they're going to encounter on their journey? And if you take those 2 things, here's 3 or 4 things I heard consumers say that they're really looking for as they make their decision. And I've looked at my competitors, and here's something where I really think that in my buying process, I can take down a barrier that they're encountering elsewhere. If you do the research to get to those 2 things, then what you're testing has a great hypothesis. It has a great you can set a reasonable expectation for what it's going to do, and you will. And regardless of whether you win or lose, regardless of whether the test drives lift or not, you will learn something about, is this what the consumers told me this? Is this what they really need? And or am I really doing this better than my competitors? And so if in that consumer journey you can take away 1 or 2 barriers or add 1 or 2 motivations that your competitors aren't, regardless of their size, regardless of their firepower, that's where your incrementality is going to come from, right? And I'd much rather that anyone spends time in these upper 2 right circles than deploys a testing software, spend some money on, like, the thing that you don't want to do as a small or mid-sized business, particularly a small business, is just start spamming designs out there, right? Like, that's a complete waste of money. It's just like, I'm going to design it, I'm going to try lots of different things on the pages, and we're going to see which of them works, right? Like, if you're going to change your site, if you're going to change some design, it better be well informed if you're a small business, right? And so it's even more important to, and what people rush to is, oh, I got a tool where I can change all kinds of stuff. I'm just going to start changing stuff and see what happens, because they're missing these upper 2. So you're saying it makes sense. Hopefully that's good, and I won't belabor that point anymore. Other thoughts or questions? Okay. Was this somewhat interesting, helpful? At least one novel thought in here that might help with the way you think about, how is your organization engaging with you to think about what needs to be tested or how to test, or if you're the whole organization, where do you begin your thinking about testing? Hopefully there was something helpful in here. And again, if nothing else, right, these are models. They're just ways of thinking about what's already really happening, right? The funnel is real. There will be far fewer people at the end of your sales cycle than there are. The journey is real. They're considering you and they're considering lots of other options. The two need to be thought about together, but begin with the consumer journey and then build a funnel that works from there. That's the ultimate takeaway recommendation from here. Other questions or thoughts, or we'll just knock off 5 minutes early? Okay, well, nothing in the chat. Thank you all for hanging out for the hour. And I'll be around. Mia will be back. We're happy to answer questions, go deeper, put finer points on things, and also hear where it would be helpful to get deeper dives. And as I've mentioned, in the third of these, we will get into that practicality of testing, right? So we'll actually go through the whole process from, okay, how do we develop a strategy, from performance data, from research, from forecasting, and then how do we go about running a design, getting back the results of experiments, and knowing if that works. So this was all a lot of setup to say, do your groundwork before you get into the process of putting optimizations out there. But the next step on this journey is the practicalities of doing the testing. So hopefully you'll come back for that one. Thank you, everyone.